So yeah, hello everybody, and welcome. I'll talk to you about. I named this startup Survival Guide. It's a bit bold name, maybe, but anyways, I think the idea for this came when I was speaking with Web, and it was about my background and what has happened. So I was asked to make that also into a talk. So this is what this is, and that's the events and learnings on my entrepreneur journey, kind of like put here. And this is actually a new talk. I haven't done this before, and part of that reason is like the company ended in December, so it's quite recent in that sense. So I'm kind of like putting out also like in retrospective what happened and that kind of stuff. So yeah, so I'm Juha Huhtakallio, and here's a little of my background. So I still say like I'm a very game oriented, so I still think it's the only reasonable thing you can do with computers, games. And I always used to say like I started doing games when I was 12 when I got a WIC 20, but I realized like quite recently that actually I started doing board games even younger, when I got bored with all the games we had at home. And on background, I had a bit of English background because I've lived in the US and UK as a kid, so I got to English daycare and did the first grade in UK. And I have a long history of doing creative stuff like music. You can see I'm not a guitarist, I'm a drummer actually, but have some guitars also. I've done improvisation theater for years. I've done writing. I've written quite a lot, something even published. And but I've been also doing programming ever since a kid. So I'm kind of like me, games combine the engineering creative side. And thinking about on the background, like what I said at 25, I said I'll never be an engineer. And what happened was like I graduated as an engineer quite recently on well, almost from the degree I built, but yeah, I did that a bit later. I also said like I'll never be an entrepreneur, and here I am running my second company. And I always also said that I'll never learn French. I'm not sure I can say French. I understand it fluently, and that's when I was 25, and all of this has happened. So now I'm saying I'll never retire before I'm 60, and I'll never get a yacht park somewhere in the world and that kind of stuff. So let's see if these happen, if there's magic in there. My background, I started as a software engineer in some software companies. And in 2000, when I heard I had a mortgage and a car loan and all that, when I heard that the game companies actually being, well, at the time it was Housemarque Remedy, that they pay actual salaries, I applied to Housemarque. Started as a game programmer, became a project manager, and then did some writing for them. I worked at Digital Chocolate, which is kind of like some people say it's the academy for Finnish game industry at the time. Because a bit later, like pretty much all the companies started in Finland had somebody from DChoc in them. I've been at and Digital Chocolate, actually my career goal ever was to be a lead game designer, and that happened there. And I kind of consider everything after that like being a positive. At Kuulasema I was design supervisor, and it's very different in the sense that it's an outsourcing company, and I actually did do contract work and even negotiations and learned to sell while working there. Then one day I was called to Metropolia, and I was asked to come and build the game education for them, which was kind of nice. And there was lots of things going there, and I think it taught me a lot on like how to solve things, how to create solutions. So you don't need to solve things based on what's available, but you can create solutions with like creating new kind of approaches. And there I started a studio, where again did selling and ran the studio. So that was also very useful for further on. Then I started my first startup called Hisome, which later became the Playstack Finland, and which kind of like combine all of these. Total life so far, I think I worked on about 100 published games and received some awards on those also. So that's my background. So I thought I'd go, in chronicle order, like what's happened in each of these and what I've kind of learned on those. So in Metropolis, I did build the degree, and there was a lot of reluctancy on doing that, because at the times, like, people were actually afraid of losing their jobs. Will games come and overtake their jobs and that kind of stuff? So it was hard in that sense. So you kind of had to package the message differently, and like doing it in small pieces, and then like finding the right people. That was one of the ways on how to get things forward, and that's how, because it started with like a couple of individual courses, and it wasn't obvious that the degree is going to happen. But it was gradually go here. Then I started the game studio in the school, and to start the studio, I needed to find what do we do there, and this is like where I like created the solution, and I realized like there's a lot of projects, small, funded projects, or companies, not companies, but organizations they might have a budget of 5,000, 10,000, but these are things that the companies don't want to do. So here was a gap for us to do. And the beauty of it was, I really like often these were like, things that would be helping children or people with conditions or illness, and this was really great. I mean, otherwise these things would have not been done. And this was a win-win-win solution for everybody. And this is something I tend to prefer if possible, because here the school got some income and reputations, the students got hired, and the customers got their products. So it was good for everybody. And it was also the thing that when this previously had been taken place, the end result was that the teachers ended up doing everything. And this was due to that contracts were made like with software companies, like actual commercial deals. And I didn't want that to happen. So I made a new model. So this was something where I created a solution. And how this worked was like the students were hired, and the customers, the contract would be the customers in the end review either accept and pay for the product and get it, or they reject and don't pay anything. And this helped in the sense that this wouldn't end up like, the staff doing the stuff till the end. And it also worked quite nicely because every project got accepted, and that worked in that sense. But I think the most important I learned from here, considering then being an entrepreneur, was like learning to hire. And if you're thinking your company at any point looking to hire somebody, especially the first recruitments will be really crucial. There are talks of that changing, but at least now, if you hire somebody and that is a wrong recruit, that can hurt, that can even take down your company. So it's very important in that sense. And why this was even more challenging was that the students didn't have any references. They might have not worked anywhere beforehand. So the only reference they might have had was their their degree numbers so far. This is where I saw that testing people and giving them an actual assignment was really useful. And this way you could see like how it works. But the other thing I noticed was really important. Like I once had two producers, two persons applying for the producer position, and they both were equal, and I wasn't sure which one should I hire. And I had there were some merits talking to the other person, but there were some things to the other person. So I took them to the studio to meet the other people. And what happened, people would talk with the other candidates, but nobody would end up talking with the other one. And this was then clear to me that, they connect with the other one. They were speaking the same language, and they had mutual interest. So it was then clear for me on what to do. So meeting the team in this sense can be really also important. And while here, I started the Bits 1 competition, which actually has the final tomorrow. And this was to close the gap in the industry. And I'd say it has helped there, because when this started, I was in the Finnish Game Awards, and I heard people saying like, where's the talent? We can't find talent. And then I go to the school and I saw almost talent. So I thought, something has to be done. And this is how the bit one I started that and created that. But this was like where I created something completely from scratch, like the whole event, the brand, the product, everything of it. And it's the 9th year now, and so yeah, and it's been now 5 years in the Finnish Game Awards. So this was, I didn't ever think it in that way. I just felt there was a need for this, and then later on I realized like this is actually a product or a brand that's been created by then. But yeah, while being here, there was many things I did and started, but like what I learned here a lot to do is like that you can create the solutions to solve things, and you don't really have to you don't always have to work on the building blocks you have already, but you can add your own blocks there also. Okay. Then Hisome, which I started, this was my first startup, and this started by an old colleague of mine asked me one day, Juha, let's make a game. And we started doing that, and I also started doing another game. And I mean, the one thing first to think always when starting a company is does it actually need to be a company? There's also like you can do a lot of things without the company. You can make even agreements without yet having the company. But we started a company, I think mainly because we had great expectations, like we were thinking to be Supercell or something. And how I did this was, well, I was thinking like, what's like big markets, and how are those related to games? And I thought like branding, advertising is really, really big, and are there games related to that? And at the time, you couldn't say there really is. It's still a bit. There are more and more of that happening, but still not that much. So that's we started doing branding games, and I had 2 teams, and another one was doing a game called Diefish at the day, and the other one was doing this brand gaming. And yeah, and then I was at Pocket Gamer 2016, well, 10 years ago, yeah. And I met with Playstack, and they loved the game even before I was in the competition, which I then actually won on that year. And that was useful. And I have to say, if I would have not won that, I'm not sure would have things gone further. So it did make an impact on that sense. But what happened then was like it was clear, evident that they wanted to start things with me and the company and so. But it took 18 months from that initial meeting for something to happen. And while that, there was a lot of talks. And this varied from like funding Diefish to creating a company which would hire 30 people, have a runway for 5 years, and like really big kind of things, and anything in between. But yeah, the end result then was that they got a IP, and then they acquired Hisome, which then became Playstack in Finland. But this is again like where I think things moved forward because also I was active in providing suggestions of what could be a possible model on how we do things. But I think the key here was like why this happened and why this 18 months would go on, because in many cases it doesn't go on. But I think I just met the right people and we connected and we felt like we can work together and there's a good partnership we can have here, which is true, which we then had. So yeah. So then, but then like later on, I at some point realized like Hisome as a company ran 3 years before this acquisition, and we delivered 3 products in this time, which we launched and which were in the store, and we had players and we had like metrics and all. And how did this happen? How did I manage to do this? And this was like with zero budget, no budget at all. So some of the people were like my old colleagues and friends, and they were like happy to be in part of that, but it wasn't like enough. We needed more people. So how did we get those people? And what we did was sweat equity. So sweat equity in short is like we make a deal where we outline the targets, and on every target we specify how much shares they get. And this worked really well. I mean, it kept people motivated, and they had a reason on contributing what they did, and we got things done and out. And I mean, the other option without this would have been trying to get people motivated to do that. I don't think that would have happened. So when this happened and the company started, we actually had about 10 owners in the company because they had contributed and were doing this. Of course, we had like disclaimers, like if they stop contributing in a while, it will go void. So we otherwise it would have been quite a mess. And I think many people might say this would be a nightmare to have so many shareholders, but actually it was more a admin practicality headache than an actual issue ever. And this also showed me like how to get people involved and how to motivate people and how to make things happen. But the other thing, like I think in these times was significant on my side, was like I used to run into people and they were asking what I'm doing now, and they're not list like I'm doing this and that and this, and it was usually like 10 things, and they would wonder like how do you get those done? How do you get anything done with so many things, and how can you do so many things? But I think this was to focus. So I always did only things that would contribute to my goals in somehow. And the goals might have been to get this startup done, get these games out, and that kind of stuff. Anything else would be dropped and not included. So yeah. Then there were some hiccups here on this journey, and one of them was like a typical thing I shouldn't have done, of course, but I started using a platform for backend. It was quite new, and it kind of like helped on many things. Like it kind of like made the infrastructure like that I could focus only on writing the code. It was quite nice in that sense. It was quite new in that sense. And sometimes some new tools help startups achieve what they do. They just died one day, and then I had to rewrite the backend for it. Now I'm using Amazon, and now it has its issues. So this is like, you know, a word of warning, like be prepared that your tools, which you take for granted, just might vanish one day. What do you do then? So have backups and think about that. The craziest thing I had was like the first game we released, like the metrics were like really out of the roof. It's crazy. We had 97% of the players who started the week complete the week. This is like crazy. It was so crazy that when I met some investors, they thought this is like completely like bumpy. It's not real. They you know, I had a funny problem here. Like yeah, that was a big problem for it. And well, what happened was like before I could solve this, like this, even I did in Impress Playstack. Like then they bought the company, and then they wanted to focus on other stuff. I thought about bringing this to that product, but wasn't considered a fit. So yeah. And maybe one of the biggest learnings at this time that really surprised me was like I had people involved I had known for quite a while already, and well, you've naturally thought you know these people, but when we had this money and business and all this involved, I mean, some things just went funny, and you could see greed even in some people and that kind of stuff. And one thing that happened just before we were closing the deal, I would ask one of the key persons, like, you can't no changes anymore after this. Now you have to commit to this. And yet there were changes, and these changes would jeopardize the whole thing. Luckily, I found a replacement in no time, so we could start it going. But like, so basically, don't take things for granted when it comes to money and people and platforms. But I think the learning for what I had here and what I've found really valuable is like when I was doing this startup, would constantly think about the future, not just what we're doing now or what we do next week, but I was thinking like what we're going to do the year after or so. But also like I would constantly ask like, what will I do if this and this happens? What if that person leaves? What if the platform breaks? What if the investment doesn't happen in 6 months? And so on and so on. How do I solve this? And and even then when the company started, I would think about these, and this would happen. And it was every time when I had a plan thought out already, what do I do in this case? It was always actually really useful, and it saved a lot of time, and the consequences might have been way bigger without this. So if you start moving forward, it's always good to think about this. And also like think of all the possible scenarios that might happen, and then think of like how would you solve this. And often plan B might not be enough. It's good to have even a plan C. And and I'd say, at least for me, this was pretty crucial, because we had issues with platforms and persons and these kind of things. And so when this was thought out beforehand, that enabled a lot of things. But also like doing this and thinking of this like retrospective, things like these would actually kind of like form the company, the product, the strategy on what it is and how it works and functions and how stable and these kind of things it is. And during the time of Playstack existing, like the total 10-year span, it involved a lot of people and new recruits, people leaving. Some people would be with all the time, but like also to prepare for this, like I think the saying you only get to borrow the talent, which is quite true. So yeah, and then Playstack happened. So they acquired Hisome 2018, and it became the Playstack Oy. And like I said, the interpitch was important part of this, but I was patient. So both teams I had were put together, and they all joined the company. And we did a game called Snatch, and which later was renamed to Dips. The simplest way to describe it was like Pokemon Go with brands. So you go around the world, you find parcels, you collect them, and they contain prizes from brands. And in the production, we had developers for 5 countries, and this was managed from UK. And well, it was a bit of a mess. I mean, you'd expect there to be a vision and clear on how this is done, but there was no vision. And I think I can't ever enough emphasize the importance of vision. And I always say you shouldn't go to production unless you have a vision. And I was today at Game Lab, where in the Espoo Game Lab, where we did an exercise where you disassemble your game and you put it back together and move and change pieces and play around what the game is. And the solid purpose of this is to find the vision from all those things inside the game. And what they did in the UK, and they wanted to keep full control of this, and they hired as a product owner somebody who had no experience of product ownership or games. And as you can know, this is not a quite good combination. There was the timeline goals was like sort of a mess, and worse was like there was changing milestones, objectives, and things during sprints. So this made it really hard. And we had different teams. We had like art team and client team, backend team, marketing team, all these different teams, and these were not syncing together and not talking together. And even though this was said many times, this needs to happen. And so that made it quite hard to work on same features for the same milestone when the teams didn't even know that they're working on which milestones. And then the product had no like metrics to validate the release. Like we didn't have targets, like what kind of user volumes or what kind of retentions are we looking to hit, kind of thing, to validate our releases. And the production model was sprints. But retrospective, I think even waterfall would have been way better. But later on, I would change this when I got the power to do that. I would change this to production teams, and that worked very well for this thing. And yeah, and it was funny. Like the advice, we had a lot of senior people in the Helsinki office, but our advice was ignored for some reason. Like I think there was some anyways, it was ignored, and like the launch was done all in. So when the launch happened, they would use everything on UA on specifically that moment, even though we had said it should be done gradually. Start with a small amount, test everything works, go further, see we're hitting the KPIs, and then gradually grow that product. But yeah, if I didn't say about the vision again already, I'll say it again, and that's something I tend to keep repeating. Any stage of company's productions, like how really important it is. And some learnings over here, like was like the cultural difference. They flew me to UK, and the sole purpose of this was to blame me on like things for going wrong and what had gone wrong. And I told them like we usually fix 30 tickets in time. Now we spend some extra effort and fix like 80 things to reach the milestone. And I said, I'm not really interested in about blaming things. I'd like to focus on fixing things and solving and moving forward. This was a cultural difference, and already working with people on the UK. And I remember in Digital Chocolate, we paid a lot of attention about the ego factor. And I never run into that like in big time in Digital Chocolates or before that. And this was like the first time where this was really big, and it really hurt production because this person being in a very significant role would focus quite a lot on like personal goals than rather the product goals, and it not make this like same thing. Yeah. And this would end up in like people in the team losing because it was so much of a mess, and that kind of stuff. And the lack of vision also like the scope was never that clear. The motivation was be hurting. There was delays, arguments, constant changes, and I see this all coming from the lack of vision. And this kind of thing then hurts the team and the company, and people will leave. And again, like I would have expected working in this kind of environment not to have these kind of issues, which I think are quite basic, but like again, you can't take things for granted, can you? That's the horror story of that. Then what happened, like after that, it was handled to Finland, namely to me. I became the product ownership, and what I did first, like there was a lot of discussion, questions, and ideas for the first few weeks of it, until I did the vision. So I created the vision for this product, and ever since I did that, like everybody understood like we're actually aiming for the same things. We have same sort of thinking. We are approaching this in the same way, and it became more of questions how we're going to reach those, and then the team could buy into this vision and be motivated on that, and it would answer all the questions they had, and so it was a smooth production ever since. And the environment became, I actually named it here, CCC, like it became a creative environment, because then everybody motivated and buying in on the vision would contribute to it and become creative, like inspired on create new content and ideas to it. And then also it created caring for the product. So I think that was in practice a very, very clear example of how the vision can change things. The other thing I did was I changed it from the sprints to the feature-based development and feature teams. So this meant like teams would be the whole production team would be made into smaller teams, and the smaller team would focus on a feature. And this was like I think previous in the production it was like, can we have it now? We want it now. To like, when are we going to have it? When will you have it ready? And then the feature team would focus on this one thing until they were done. The product was huge, the features were huge, so it made good sense on giving the working piece work on these features, which would take months to complete. So sprints made no sense in that sense. But one thing I noticed, like, I'm not sure this is common, but at least it here happened very often that every time there was any discussion about how the production is structured, this would end in endless discussions and variations and ideas and so on. So I at some point just stopped that. But anyways, we had a better product than ever, and we had a buyer, a company, the IP, and everything was signed, deal done. And what then happened was that the buyer's stock, it just plummeted one day completely. And how would I say? I used to say, when you have names in the paper, you can be sure of things happening. But actually, I've heard quite many entrepreneurs saying, it's only certain when you have it in your account, and even then, it might be yet arguable later on. But yeah, that's what happened then. So if you now look at the background, this was the first startup, and it's now in Selvitystila, which it's like we're going to close it, and this is quite controlled. And I think the best thing is, like, we have no debtors, and most of all, everybody has got their pay in full, and that's something I'm quite happy. So nobody is left without anything. So that's what happened. But looking back on the company, like 10 years in existence, I estimated about 60 recruits total in the companies. At the biggest time, we had 18 employees, and it brought to Finland about 10 million euros during existence. And we created one product with 3 variations. Actually, we did, I think, 6-7 casual games also in additions. And when I started the company, what did I expect? What did I hope to happen? Well, I did expect it to be huge and have a huge turnover and the brand gaming to be huge, but didn't quite reach that. But I also started thinking, like, when you start a company, what is the default? I think it's 90 or 80% of companies die at least on the 18th month, called the death valley. So that's kind of the basic expectations. And all companies end at some point, which is also like the default expectations. And what kind of bugs me, like Finland, they kind of support being an entrepreneur at the same time, but at the same time, your company doesn't make it, is considered a failure, and it's easy to be declared bankruptcy in that way, and that's something you actually get in your credit in for that. So you did a bankruptcy, and I just find this funny because it's kind of the default, and I think it's been treated quite horribly. Whereas in the US, I mean, people starting companies are celebrated and respected for their courage. So I think that's what we should have. And I am still with Playstack in the way that I do discovery for them. So I travel around and I come across games, and I send the games I think are good for Playstack. So I still continue looking for games for publishing. And a lot of stuff happened over there. And if I think, would I do all this again? I definitely do it. Would I do something differently? Well, yes, always. But in a way, I mean, the end result, I'd say it's during the first 3 years, there was a lot of points when I was like, will this survive? Will this company make it? Will anything happen? Will anything come out of it? So in that sense, it did. So I'm happy in that sense. And like I said, I was never to be an entrepreneur. So in that sense, I'm happy with this. So now Edugametion, which I'm doing now, this is like and this is a very different story. So this is a company I started on the side, and looking at what's happened with the company, it's been more like it hasn't been that well in the same way, like aiming for something, because this was started on the side for a single purpose. And sorry, so doing game design for so long and teaching on it, I thought I should do a book about it. I thought book is like maybe a bit outdated media, so I did a website out of it. And Metropolia wanted the course I had for them, and then they asked would I have more. Then I asked around some friends, and now there's like 15 courses available from the open, and that's kind of like something that's expanded, went into in unplanned direction, and I just followed it, and it's been a good one. And maybe the name creation for this company kind of like summarizes things that have happened with this. Like I had a couple of other names on my mind for it, but the PRH wouldn't accept those. Said they were too much of a well, it wouldn't match their criteria, so I couldn't use those. And I had Edugametion, which I was thinking using for something else. Then I thought like actually it works for this, so then it became Education. And when Playstack was ending and ended, I started those courses like a Netflix thing for game development, and I even went to Slush to find funding for this and to sell it, but it didn't really take off, and it took me quite a while to realize it's not happening. But then what happened, like some of you already used the Game Mentor platform. That was something I've come across people working in these places, like using a lot of tools and that kind of. I thought like I want to make it simpler, and I did something to it, and pretty soon it became like a full product, and that's kind of like surprised me, like how that happened, but like it did. And I think learning here, which I'd say applies to more than just entrepreneurship, is like, you shouldn't push things with force to force them if they're not going to happen. And sometimes it's good to go with the flow. And I think that's been pretty good on Edugametion, like how things have happened and how it's gone. Like been more to go with the flow, whereas Playstack was very focusing and aiming on certain targets. And after this, Playstack ended, so I thought like I'll just go with the flow and see what happens. And also, okay, I'll show that in a moment. What has happened related to India? But to summarize, like some things from this journey, like what I'm thinking to keep, and I think will make a difference if I ever start a third company or something like that. One of them is like I sometimes hear people saying like the company values, or those, do I need those? What are those? Do they matter? And I say they do. And when they make the difference, is like when the difference needs to be made. And there's things like I've sometimes heard people say about Playstack, something they heard for somebody, is usually pretty positive. And when I think of that, why is that? I think it's because of the values of the company. And one of the key values was like people first, always. And this is something I came across in Metropolia already, and I had thought about it, but it came to practice when people had like problems in their personal life, which meant like they couldn't work on the project at hand, and which could have been a disaster for the production. But I couldn't ever force myself for the people to, not take care of themselves first, and then solving the things somehow otherwise. And this was a value that I took with me to Playstack, and when things happened like this, it would be the same. And I think this was something that people valued, but also like many other things, like in the company and these kind of things, like, and like, I mean, there are companies that look to exploit people. I don't look to do that, and they do that by, hiring you for internship, not paying salaries and these kind of things. And I never wanted to do anything like that, and these kind of things. Then the recruiting carefully. We had some misses, of course, at Playstack, and it can affect a lot. It can affect mainly the mood in the company, which can be a big impact. I mean, one person can affect a lot of, even the whole company. and change the mindsets or approach that's going on there. But anyways, like this is where the and I always use a test. I always give them an actual assignment, and it doesn't make sense to me to create an assignment. But if you give them like this is, yeah, I mean, this is very useful for all the aspects. Like then you see what they would actually do on a certain case, and then you can ask like, is this production ready or not? And then that's a good evaluation point. And have the applicant meet the team. And in the end, I think as the recruits also had the guts and intuition feeling like sometimes everything was right, but my intuition said there's something not sitting here, something not going right. And later on, I would find out why. But sometimes, yeah, they were wrong recruits, so to say. And like I said, money does change people. And so I think Finns are very trusting in that sense on what people say and do. But like I noticed, that's not always the case. And I have sold stuff, but I'm not like a big time salesperson. So I've noticed sometimes I leave money on the table when I should go and grab it. So that's something that's useful to learn on that. And like I said, just don't push too much. So I've been going with the flow at this point. But yeah, I mean, after doing all this, I have to notice like, even though I thought I'll never become an entrepreneurship, I didn't want to be that much money oriented, and I still am. But like, I have to say, I'm loving it. It's been great, and I'm looking to still continue it. And so now it is Edugametion. I usually know what I do next. Now I'm not sure. I haven't really thought. I don't feel the urge of having to do something in that sense. But like when I went with the flow, like this happened. All of a sudden, I was in India. I got invited there, and on the left, I'm giving the Game of the Year award in the IGDC, India's biggest game conference, and this was their main award. So suddenly I was there. On the right, there's the delegation of the Prime Minister in India. So Edugametion has signed a couple of MOUs with a couple of Indian organizations to start business together. That seems to be where it's going. And well, that's pretty much 45 minutes, and we can go to questions. Oh yeah, and this has been like a chronicle story of my entrepreneurship and the learnings on there. And I can do also mentoring. I usually talk about game design and entrepreneurship, but also publishing, because I did discovery with Playstack. I've done product ownership, and I've done a lot of like finding unique selling point, the monetization, the product, how to say, polishing the product, finding the core and the what makes it tick kind of thing. And I've tested a lot of production models, so that's something I can talk about also. But also, I wouldn't call myself a marketing branding person, but that's apparently I've done that somewhat also, and then some recruitment hints, and I still do programming on my as a hobby even, and I've done some backend solutions, so mainly on the first few topics. But yeah, thank you. Any questions, anybody?